Hi everyone, welcome to Learning Aid. This is part 2 of gametogenesis video where we will be talking about oogenesis. We'll be covering three things: statistics related to oocytes in the prenatal and postnatal period, growth and maturation of follicles and ovulation, and lastly, the cell structure of an ovum. Let's get started. For statistics, I've used values from manuscripts. However, I did find a few discrepancies when compared to textbooks such as Inder Bing Singh and Lingman. So for students appearing for competitive exams, I'd suggest you all to use the table from this video and then just cross-check the values with the books you're referring to at your university. Alright, let's dive in. When a female child is born, she already has the total number of eggs or the ovum that she'll ever need during her life. Oogenesis, it begins at around 7 weeks of gestation, and during this time, primordial germ cells colonize the newly formed ovaries of a female fetus. These cells are now referred to as oogonia. Oogonia then undergoes rapid proliferation or mitosis and increases in number to around 6 to 7 million during 10th to 14th week of gestation. At around 20 weeks of gestation, oogonia becomes primary oocyte and their development is arrested in prophase 1 of the first meiotic division until the onset of puberty. At around 28 weeks of gestation, a rapid rate of follicular atresia, that is degeneration, begins. It reduces the oocyte count to anywhere between 400,000 to 2 million. This is the number of oocytes that are present during birth in a baby girl. Oocyte atresia or degeneration, it continues, and by puberty, only 40,000 oocytes remain, of which only 300 to 400 oocytes will reach the ovulatory stage during a woman's reproductive life. The rest will degenerate. Alright, now that we've talked about the number of oocytes during birth, puberty, etc., let's look into the follicular development stages of an ovum. There are two distinct phases of follicular development. The first one is gonadotropin independent growth or pre-antral phase, and the second one is the gonadotropin dependent growth or antral phase. Let's talk about the first phase, that is the gonadotropin independent or the pre-antral phase. At the time of birth, all the surviving primary oocytes are diploid and are in the form of primordial follicle. That is, they are surrounded by flat follicular cells, also known as flat pregranulosa cells. The local growth factors, they stimulate and activate the primordial follicles that changes the flat follicular cells to cuboidal cells. This marks the beginning of primary follicles. In a primary follicle, primary oocyte is separated from the follicular cells by a glycoprotein polymer capsule known as zona pellucida. Also, the follicular cells, they start to express FSH receptors, that is, follicle stimulating hormone receptors. When primary follicles transform into secondary follicles, two major changes occur. First, the simple cuboidal cells of the primary follicle transforms into stratified granulosa cells. Second, the stroma of the primary follicle develops blood supply and differentiates into theca interna and theca externa cells. The theca interna cells of the secondary follicles start to express LH receptors, that is, luteinizing hormone receptors. So by now, the follicular cells are expressing FSH receptors and the theca interna cells are expressing LH receptors. Everything after this stage, that is further maturation of the secondary follicles and selection of a dominant follicle for ovulation, is gonadotropin dependent. That is, we're slowly entering the antral phase. The gonadotropin releasing hormone released from the hypothalamus stimulates the anterior pituitary to produce gonadotropin hormones, that is the FSH and LH. Initially, the estrogen level in the bloodstream is low, which results in high FSH and low LH release from the anterior pituitary. FSH, it binds to the FSH receptors in the granulosa cell layer of the secondary follicle, and in response to that, the follicles continue to grow and develop a fluid-filled space known as antrum. At this stage, the follicle is transforming from secondary to tertiary follicle. The antrum, it contains secretory materials from the growing oocyte and the granulosa cells. The LH, that is the luteinizing hormone, it binds to the luteinizing hormone receptors of the theca interna cells, resulting in the production of androgen that facilitates follicular growth. The androgen diffuses into the granulosa cells, which then, with the help of enzyme aromatase, converts the androgen into estrogen. Estrogen is then released into the bloodstream and its level slowly rises. Now, the increasing estrogen levels send a negative feedback and a positive feedback to hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, that is HPA axis. The negative feedback signal, it decreases the circulating levels of FSH, and the positive feedback signal increases the circulating levels of LH. So, by now, we have low FSH and high LH levels. Let's see what their effects are. Firstly, the effects of low FSH levels. Large tertiary follicle, it remains sensitive to the decreasing levels of FSH due to its large size, and it is therefore selected as the dominant follicle. Whereas the smaller follicles that are no longer sensitive to the reduced FSH levels degenerate. The dominant follicle that persists is known as the Graafian follicle. The Graafian follicle, it continues to mature through rapid proliferation of granulosa and theca cells. The antrum also continues to enlarge rapidly. Meiosis I of primary oocyte is completed just before ovulation, and it results in formation of two haploid cells, one of which forms the secondary oocyte and the other one forms polar body. The secondary oocyte then commences meiosis II and is arrested at metaphase until fertilization. So far we've seen the effects of low FSH levels. Now let's look into the effects of high LH levels, also known as LH surge. The granulosa cells of the Graafian follicle develops high concentration of LH receptors and becomes responsive to the LH surge that eventually leads to ovulation. During ovulation, the follicle releases its mature oocyte for fertilization, and the follicle turns into corpus luteum. LH surge also leads to luteinization of the corpus luteum, where the granulosa cells transform into granulosa lutein cells and the theca cells transform into theca lutein cells. These cells then secrete progesterone, estrogen, and inhibin. Now, regulation of these hormones is based on whether or not the fertilization occurs. Okay, so let's look into both the scenarios in detail. If the fertilization does occur, inhibin produced by the corpus luteum sends negative feedback to HPA axis to decrease the circulating levels of FSH. This prevents maturation of primordial follicle. So at this point, when the fertilization is occurring, we do not need maturation of any more follicles. So logically, it makes sense to reduce the circulating levels of FSH and prevent the maturation of primordial follicles. Okay? Now, the corpus luteum also continues to produce progesterone and estrogen, and this helps in thickening of the endometrium that is needed for implantation of the fertilized egg. Along with this, progesterone also sends a negative feedback signal to HPA axis to decrease GnRH release, which in turn reduces FSH and LH release. On the other hand, if fertilization does not occur, inhibin sends negative feedback signal to the HPA axis and inhibits gonadotropin hormone, that is FSH and LH release. This regresses the corpus luteum to corpus albicans and reduces the progesterone, estrogen, and inhibin levels. Due to reduced progesterone levels, endometrium regresses and shreds, leading to menstruation. Also, due to reduced levels of progesterone, estrogen, and inhibin, GnRH release increases. And this kickstarts a new cycle. So, I hope you guys have understood what's happening with the hormones here. If you'll want, pause and go back to the hormone section to listen to it one more time. It's very easy, and once you'll understand the whole logic flow, you'll remember it for life. Okay, so I'd really suggest you guys to pause and go back to the hormone section to listen to it one more time. Alright, let's go back to the ovum. Okay, now in case the fertilization does occur, secondary oocyte, it completes its meiosis too, and it results in formation of a fertilized egg and a second polar body, altogether known as the zygote. We'll be covering fertilization in detail in our next video. Okay, and lastly, let's take a look at the cell structure of an egg or the ovum. Now remember you guys, we're discussing ovum or the egg before fertilization. Alright, so the ovum is a round non-motile cell that has a size of about 0.2 mm. The cell substance of the ovum is known as the yolk or ooplasm. The nucleus is known as the germinal vesicle, and the nucleolus is known as the germinal spot. The ovum, it is lined by a thin white line membrane that is further lined by zona pellucida. Between the white line membrane and the zona pellucida lies the perivite line space where the polar body is present. The white line membrane is the plasma membrane of the ovum, and it controls the entry and exit of the substances. Next is zona pellucida, which is the glycoprotein membrane and has multiple roles such as oocyte development, protection during growth and transport, fertilization, spermatozoa binding, preventing polyspermy, blastocyte development, and preventing premature implantation, that is ectopic pregnancy. The ooplasm of the ovum, it contains cortical granules that release enzyme during fertilization to harden the zona pellucida and digest the binding protein on the sperm to prevent polyspermy. That is, after one sperm has entered the egg, the cortical granules, they release enzyme that hardens the zona pellucida and does not let any more sperms enter into the ovum. Okay, now during discharge of the ovum from the Graafian follicle, several layers of follicular cells, they adhere to the outer surface of zona pellucida and are arranged radially, forming corona radiata. It provides support and nutrition to the egg cell. Okay, so far we've covered stats about oocyte, mitosis and meiosis for oocyte formation, follicular stages of development, hormonal cycle, and the cell structure of an ovum. Lastly, I have few MCQs from the 3 embryology videos that are present on this channel so far, and these can crop up anywhere in your university exams or any of the competitive exams that you give. So I'm gonna let you guys take your own time to solve these. So please pause the video and solve them at your own pace, and the answer to each of the question will appear at the end of all 10 questions. Alright? Thank you so much for watching this video. Please let me know in the comment section below if you all like the video, or if there's anything else that you all want me to add to these videos, or if there's a topic that you can think of that you want to learn. I'll see you guys in my next video. Take care.